Hello, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, or good morning from wherever you are tuning in from today. And welcome to a Microsoft Reactor live stream event. Today, we're going to learn how to build complex visualizations in Power BI with ChatGPT. For those who don't know me, my name is Nadia, and I'm the Reactor Program and Event Manager based here in Sydney. Today, I'll be joined by Greg Nash, who is a data platform MVP and a principal consultant at Dear Watson Consulting. But before we kick off this session, I'd just like to draw your attention to the Reactor Code of Conduct. In short, we want to ensure this is an enjoyable event for all, so please ensure your comments are constructive and welcoming to all attendees. Please do send your questions throughout the session in the chat box, and we'll try and answer as many as possible. Additional links are going to be added throughout the chat, so you can find out some more information. And if you are curious about being a community leader or being part of our MVP program, you can do so at mvp.microsoft.com, or you can scan the QR code in this presentation above. So now it's time to hand the floor over to our incredible speaker, Greg. Hey, Greg.
Hey, Nadia. How you doing?
Good, thank you. Now it's floor over to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here doing a Reactor session. I've attended many and not had a chance to present yet, so I'm looking forward. This is my first one. As Nadia said, my name is Greg Nash. I am a data platform MVP. I'm based in Melbourne, Australia. There's lots of things on this page, I know. You can contact me via LinkedIn any old time. Use the QR code there. They're pretty easy to find. Power BI Unicorn is the easiest way to find me on LinkedIn. I also run the local Power BI meetup group here in Melbourne. We meet up every month and we talk about Power BI and all the cool things and fun things that you can do in Power BI, the latest stuff. We drink beer and we eat pizza and we nerd out. It's good fun. So I hope if you are based in Melbourne, or you can catch up with our content online as well. You can find that via the Meetup platform. All right. Just a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. So obviously we'll do a little bit of an introduction and a bit of conceptual foundation. I understand some of you may be looking at this and going, we're going to be building complex visualizations with ChatGPT. I can't do anything complex with ChatGPT. How are we going to do this? And so I'll give you a little bit of an introduction to the different tools that we use in the Power BI world when we are doing advanced kind of data visualization or complex data visualization. If we have to go beyond the scope of the Power BI tool, if you like. We're going to talk about iterative development and why it's important in this space. And then I'll take you through kind of how I went through the process of building a complex visualization. There's a whole online video series of me actually doing this that you can go and check out if you haven't had a chance to see it before. If you have seen that video series, then you're not going to learn much, unfortunately. There's a lot of, we're just going to be talking a lot about the stuff that we did in that session, but I will synthesize my understanding of what I think the best approach is for using ChatGPT in not just a complex scenario like for Power BI data visualization, but just generally speaking, I think you can build some pretty amazing stuff with ChatGPT, provided you have the right kind of approach. If I have time, I do talk the leg off a chair and I apologize, but if I have time, we'll do a bit of a demo. We'll see if we can get ChatGPT to build something. Fingers crossed everything works. Might not. I don't know. And then I'll talk about tips and tricks and other resources that you can use. So hopefully that's there. Feel free to pop your questions in the chat. I have the chat over here. I'll read them every now and then. So feel free to say hello as well. It'd be good to see where people are coming from and that kind of stuff too. All right, let's crack on. We've got a question. It is ChatGPT available in Power BI in an enterprise? It's not available in Power BI as such. ChatGPT is a completely separate product at the moment. There is this concept of a Power BI Copilot that we can talk about that hasn't been released, and it's part of Fabric, really. And so there's a little bit of ChatGPT inside Power BI, but not really. We're going to be using ChatGPT in its vanilla form, and so we'll talk about that in a sec. Before we get started, I want to introduce a few quotes. Thomas Edison said, "I've not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." And I really like this quote. It obviously reminds us that what initially may appear to be failure is in reality a stepping stone towards discovery. Each attempt or each iteration brings us closer to our desired outcomes, teaching us what doesn't work and guiding us towards what does. Another quote about failure from Winston Churchill: success is not final, failure is not fatal, it is the courage to continue that counts. And you may guess that the theme to this whole presentation is around persisting and really in the spirit of perseverance in the face of challenge is really what this is about. And then finally, something from John Maxwell: fail early and fail often, but always fail forward. And so for those of you that are familiar with my work, you will know that I like to embrace failure as much as possible to try and learn new things. And I think if you're going to be in this space, in this technology space, especially when you're dealing with cutting edge technologies like ChatGPT and AI, you really need to embrace these ideas of failure to learn new things and to push the boundaries of what we're doing. And we do this in this space. I didn't expect to be able to succeed in what I was trying to do when I first started this this endeavor, and I was really surprised at what I learned. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about data visualization, generally speaking. So in the world of data science and artificial intelligence and this kind of stuff, we're often, in the data visualization world, we are asked to build fairly complex visualizations sometimes. And in the operational reporting world, which is kind of the world of Power BI, it doesn't really do it a lot of the time. You need to do things that maybe Power BI doesn't support. And so we need to equip people with the ability to be able to build something a little bit more complex if they're doing advanced analytics, or they're doing machine learning, or they're doing this kind of cluster analysis and regression analysis and all this kind of stuff. These are more advanced kind of visualizations that aren't necessarily supported by the Power BI world. Quickly, just to introduce the different tools that we're going to be using in this space to achieve this. The first one, obviously, ChatGPT. I'm working on the assumption that you know what ChatGPT is, but if you don't, the quick answer is it's a really smart AI that naturally processes language and makes cool things. It's really good at language, and I think language is the key message here. So you can, it's trained on human conversation, and you can have a conversation with it, and it will output some pretty amazing stuff. Hopefully, we'll get the chance to see it in action. There is, of course, Power BI, the ubiquitous Microsoft data visualization and reporting tool. Obviously, this is a fairly popular tool. I'm also assuming you've seen Power BI before and that you kind of know what it is. It makes interactive visualizations. When we look at Power BI, when we're creating custom visualizations in Power BI, there's lots of different ways to do it. You can do it in all sorts of different ways. One of the ways you can do it is using a tool called Denb, created by a very smart fellow from New Zealand called Daniel Marsh-Patrick. And what he did was he took what is known as the Vega-Lite visualization grammar. So this is like a language that you can use to describe a visualization in JSON format. So you might be familiar with the coded format JSON. You describe the visualization in JSON format, and you can then import it into Power BI and throw your data in and see this new visualization that's never existed before until now. And so this is a custom visual that Daniel Marsh-Patrick's created so that we can use Vega-Lite to describe more advanced visualizations that aren't available in the standard Power BI set. So pretty kind of advanced kind of concepts. We've got ChatGPT, we've got Vega-Lite, this language to describe these visualizations, and then we've got obviously putting Vega-Lite into Power BI using this Denb tool. So Vega-Lite, like I said, it's an interactive graphics tool. We can create simplified yet powerful interface for data visualization inside our tool, which is Power BI. As you can see, Power BI's got some relatively good visualizations already. You can, as I said, create a bunch of different custom visualizations inside Power BI already. You can import them from the store. You can bring in all sorts of crazy visualizations. Where the use case we're talking about here is when we need to build something that's beyond that, or doesn't quite fit the box that the standard visualization set provides us. And that includes the ones that are available in the store. So we might have a very specific thing we're trying to build, and so we need to use this Denb tool. Now, the way Denb kind of works is we've got our Vega-Lite specification on the left. That's in that JSON format, like I said. You can see here on the left, there's this JSON code. It's just code. It's just JSON. JSON is a relatively straightforward kind of markup language to use to describe different objects. It's used all over the web for all sorts of different situations. In this case, we create what's called a specification. That specification describes what we're going to put on the screen. So on the right-hand side here, you can see you have this visualization render, and then we've got our table of data, the stuff that happens inside the data render as well. So this is when you look at the Denb screen, this is kind of what you see inside Power BI. And it's actually inside the visual itself is where you get to see all of this different stuff if you've never seen Denb before. And then, of course, we talk about ChatGPT. Now, when we do prompting in ChatGPT, and this is essentially about the way that we kind of approach prompting in ChatGPT, there's lots of different ways that people talk about prompting in ChatGPT. You can do these things like text completion prompts. So you can give it the start of a sentence, you know, the quick brown fox, and then it finishes it off for you. You can give it instruction-based prompts. So, you know, give it a specific command, a single command. You can go for these kind of multiple choice type promptings. And a lot of the things that you see in ChatGPT is they speak about zero shot or few shot, or in here it says end shot prompting, right? Where you're providing a number of examples to ChatGPT to shape its output, if you like. So you say, hey, I'd like you to give you know, a list of so-and-so, and here's a few sample lists to give you a bit of an idea of what my expected output is. And then you ask it your question, and then it gives you this output. So you're giving it these few multiple shots, they call them shots in the prompting world, to present the output. You can do this kind of thing in terms of chain of thought kind of prompting, where you're iteratively extending a story or conversation. And this is really the kind of technique that we'll be talking about here. And then there's this concept of generated knowledge prompting, using pre-trained models to generate knowledge-based responses. So this is more about if you pre-train your model to do stuff. So the thing that people talk about a lot is, how do we make the perfect prompt? Let's build this prompt and it's going to output all this amazing stuff in ChatGPT. We want to build a single prompt that creates this incredible output from ChatGPT. One of the problems with this kind of approach is that there's so many things that we want to build, and you might be interested in writing a book or doing something else, you know, not necessarily data visualization, that is quite complex, and it's very, very difficult to describe in a single prompt how to generate that output. So this is a data visualization that it's one of my favorites. I've admired this for a long time. It comes from a man called Edward Tufte. He pulled it out of it was actually out of the New York Times. They showed the weather in 2003, as you can see on the graph here. And this is one of his favorite data visualizations. We like this data visualization because it tells us a really amazing story in a single kind of visualization. It's dense with data. Has high data density. We can see there's a lot of information in this visualization, but it also tells this kind of macro story about temperature and how the temperature kind of moves throughout the year, where the lows and the highs are. The dark bars represent the min and the max temperature on any given day. The light bar that surrounds the dark bar is your all-time min and your all-time max. So you can see in April, there was one day there that was almost the all-time highest record day for April in 2003 in terms of temperature in New York. So you can see these insights at a glance as well, things like that. And then the darker kind of line running through the middle is kind of your normal range. So you can see, was it an unusually hot or cold day on any given day all the way through the year? You can kind of see how it rises and falls throughout as we get into June, July, because in the opposite of Australia, the US, you get the hot weather happens in July, whereas we have the cold weather in July, which you will see when we actually get to the visualization. And then at the bottom, they've got the cumulative rainfall at the very bottom. And so I was like, you know what? I really want this visualization in Power BI. I want to be able to build this. and it's quite difficult to build, it turns out, because that's not those are columns inside that kind of chart, but it's not a column chart in the traditional kind of Power BI sense. There's a min and a max, and you could kind of create, use different custom visuals to almost do it. You could use a box and whisker chart, for example, to do a similar kind of thing, but I wanted it to look exactly like this. I wanted to have the white lines across showing it at each of the temperature ranges. I wanted to build something that looked almost exactly like this or very similar so that I could visualize that in my Power BI. I think it's a great visualization. So how do I achieve this? Well, I said, well, I reckon I can do this in ChatGPT. I think I can do it with Denb and I can do it with Vega-Lite. And a friend of mine said, I bet you a beer you can't get ChatGPT to build this, because I think there's a whole idea around building something from a single prompt. You couldn't write a single prompt that outputted this in ChatGPT or in Vega-Lite or whatever. There's just no way, right? It's too complicated for something like this to build. But I happen to know a secret about ChatGPT because I have been playing around with it for a long time. Well, as long as you can, I guess. What's that? Since January or whenever it came out, I'm pretty much trying to replace myself with AI. I'm sure many of you are as well. If you're interested in these types of sessions, ChatGPT is good fun, and I have been playing with it for a while. I happen to know a secret. The secret is a lot of bad prompts is much better than one perfect prompt. And I think this is really the key kind of message around building something that is complex. It comes down to this concept of iterative development, right? So this is the last quote that I'll give you, but it's one of my favorite quotes. I put it in almost all of my presentations. The quote is, "A complex system that works is invariably found to have evolved from a simple system that worked." So we're saying here that a complex system must evolve from a simple system. And the inverse proposition is also true, that a complex system designed from scratch never works and cannot be made to work, right? And so we see this all the time. If you work in software development or you work in anything where you have to build something complex, it's very, very difficult to design the complete solution from scratch and then build it and it all just works the first time. That is almost impossible to get that to work. And this is found by John Gall in the Systems Bible. It's a sort of irreverent book about systems. He's got some really great quotes in there. He talks about how systems are constantly trying to fail. Like there's all of this. You're always battling against a system that is trying to fail, and that really when you're dealing with complex systems, there's just so many failure points that they all eventually fail in some way, which is why you can't have really large complex systems. Even the likes of the Amazons of the world are constantly battling against these kind of failure modes. G says he's also working on replacing himself by AI. Good work, G. I like it. All right, so I have this concept around agile development and iterative development, right? Is that as you go up the scale of originality, right? As you're trying to build something that is more original, you need more agility, right? So I guess the example here is if you're trying to build a house, there's lots of houses that have been built in the past. It's not a very original thing to do. We don't have to invent concrete and wood and tiles and things like that. They've already been invented. It's really just a matter of assembly. You can get away with using a waterfall style project to build that unoriginal thing because there's not a lot of new things to be built. If you're a comedian though, and you want to build a comedy set, the way that comedians build a comedy set, which is obviously highly original, it has to be completely unique every time so that you can do your comedy special or whatever it is on Netflix. They go through hundreds and hundreds of iterations of each one of those jokes. They get up on stage and they fail and they fail and they fail and they fail, right? And that's because of the high level of originality that's required to be able to deliver something like a good comedy set. If you if you do too much agility on something that's already determined, you end up in the waste of money zone. You wouldn't build a house by saying, well, let's build a wall and then go and get the customers and find out if they're happy with the wall, and then change the wall and then put another wall up and then see if those two walls work together. You're not going to build a house in that highly agile way, right? It's a waste of money to do something like that, unless you're Grand Designs or something like that. Similarly, if you end up if you try to go too original with low agility, so you need something that's highly original, but you use a waterfall process, you end up in this situation where you never finish, because the thing changes more quickly than you can deliver the project. And you see this in technology projects where people are trying to deliver something like a complex piece of software in a waterfall manner. They're constantly having to review the requirements and all of the different bits and pieces, and they never really end up finishing because they're always in this movement of concept, this change zone that's moving too fast for the project. And so there is this balance between originality and agility that we need to do. And so in the spirit of that, when we're dealing with something like a visualization that's never really been built before, we need to use this more agile kind of technique. And we're using something like ChatGPT. I think that that definitely is going to come into play. So we need a clear goal to reduce the number of iterations. So I've got my picture that I've got from a book, and I'm like, this is a great picture. I want to build this in Power BI. I definitely think it's possible. So I need to be able to approach it. So defining the goal, identifying the data sources, getting all of these bits and pieces set up is going to help me in the short run. The next thing that I do is I do some what I call drafting, right? So I'm now in this visualization, I'm showing you a standard Power BI visualization. It's a line chart. And all I'm doing here is checking that I've got my data right. So we're using a native visualization in Power BI to check our numbers and to get the data right first before we even attempt to build this kind of original visualization. Because the hard part in data is data. The visualization is usually relatively straightforward, but we do want to make sure that the data is showing all the things that we would expect. So here I've got my all-time max and all-time min, are those sort of lighter red and blue. They're sitting outside my min and max temp for a single year. That looks right. If I turn these lines into bars, then I'm going to be pretty close to my visualization or just through that, right? And so I know my data is going to look pretty good before I even start attempts to do the visualization part. Okay, so we start simple. The first we do is we use what is a sample inside the Denb world, right? So we just pull this, and if we get to the demo, I'll show you what this kind of looks like. But you can say, hey, just give me a basic kind of column chart. Now I know that I'm going to start with a column chart here because that's the first kind of working version. Just give me the maximum temperatures and show that in a column chart. So that's where I started. Fortunately, there are some nice little kind of sample bits that I can pull out of the Denb tool, and I copied those into ChatGPT, and then we start this concept of prompting iteratively. So we know exactly what we want to build. It's really now about what are the sorts of prompts that we can use to build that. So really, it's about simple iterative prompts, right? So you see here, the first thing I asked it was, hey, do you know Vega-Lite as code? Because I didn't even know whether it would know Vega-Lite. And it came back and said, yes, I know Vega-Lite. It's this specification. I understand it. I can write Vega-Lite. And the good thing about ChatGPT is it's trained in pretty much most of the code that is kind of out there in the GitHub world or wherever ChatGPT's been trained on. And so ChatGPT knows how to answer a lot of code-based questions. It's particularly good at Python. It's not very good at things like Power BI DAX because there's not enough information out there on the world for it to pull down and to be able to tell you about. But Python, pretty much everyone's done everything in Python. It's the most popular programming language in the world. And so you've got a situation where ChatGPT is really good at it. So I said, nice one, you're the best. I'm always polite to ChatGPT. It's trained on human conversation. And so you get better outcomes if you're nice to it. It also just adds a positive spin. Here's some Vega-Lite code. So I pasted some Vega-Lite code and I said, I need this to be a column chart, not a bar chart. Can you change it? Because the sample was actually a bar chart. So a bar chart runs horizontally and a column chart runs vertically. So it said, yeah, sure, I'll give you some code. And it spits out the code and it gives me a column chart. And I'm like, okay, that's the first step. So then the next step is like, awesome, that works. We need to be able to change the date. Now, I said several bad prompts are better than one perfect prompt. I don't even spell things right when I'm prompting ChatGPT. It kind of gets what I mean, and that's all that matters, right? So it says, awesome, that works, except we need to change the date to a temporal type. So the problem with the previous chart, you can't see it at the bottom here, is that all the dates were kind of a bit weird looking. So I changed the date to a temporal type. And now we want to make the column have a min and max value, where the min temperature will set the lower bounds of the column and the max temperature will set the upper bounds. I didn't really know how to describe this, so I was trying to just describe it in a way that I hoped it would understand, and it outputted the below, right? So I use the output of the previous prompt to set the next prompt and say, well, do this and that, and let me see how it looks. And it came out perfect. I'm like, that's exactly what I was looking for. So you can see that just like simple iterative prompts, making one change at a time, already has got us like a long way. Like, this is as far as I expected to honestly get before I ran into some kind of weird problem with the way ChatGPT was spitting out the code. But we persisted on now that we've got something that kind of looks like it's working. So I come back and I say, that works great. Thanks. You rule, being polite. Now we want to add a layer that is the average line as a filter over the top of the column chart. And the measure is called the all-time average, right? So in the Denb specifications, you have this concept of putting your measures in, your Power BI measures. And so I've got a measure called all-time average. I wanted to bring into the chart to show me an average line. Now I actually didn't need this in the end. Because this red line, because it actually, we end up using this normal kind of line instead of just a single average. But I wanted to see if it would work anyway, and it did. A quick tip here is that the reason why Power BI, ChatGPT is quite good with Denb code is that Denb specifications are quite short, right? You get a small amount of code and you can kind of iterate on that. So I could basically copy the whole code in each time and I can iterate on that piece of code over and over again. It forgets what it's doing after a few prompts. And so this is the other reason why I think iterative development is superior to trying to do big bang prompts, is that after you get a certain way down, there's only so much it can kind of remember, and then it starts to forget why are we here in the first place. You can just copy out that piece of code wherever it's up to, give it a new system prompt or give it a new starting prompt to say, hey, we're working on a visualization. Here's the current code. Here's what we're doing. Here's a little bit of context, and then continue on, and then you can at least get a few more prompts going that way. So you need to periodically remind the AI that what's happening if you want to use this technique. So you need to keep in mind with every response that it's possible. You need to check the response to just make sure that it hasn't forgotten what it's talking about, and it does do it. So it's something you do need to be careful on. So the next visualization or iteration, I wanted to get the gray bars in the background to show the min and the max all time. And so I said, hey, you're really great. We'd like to add another column that represents the all-time high and the all-time low. And it needs to be in a lighter color, and it's going to sit underneath the main column for the measure, and the measure for it is called all-time max, and the low measure is called all-time min. And so I've given it a few instructions here. I know it can kind of handle this set. So I knew it had to create a color. I knew it needed to have a Z axis type thing, that it needs to sit underneath the main column. I'd learned this from kind of reading the outputs of the previous prompts, and then it outputted again. It outputted like literally the perfect thing. And this is, it's an interesting kind of exercise in doing this. The thing that I discovered is that if you give it only a small and simple set of instructions, it's pretty good at interpreting those and then trying to do it. If I had tried to give it too much information, and I would say any more than this, it's going to start going in a direction that you probably don't want it to do. So this concept of keeping it really small and simple is, I find, really, really effective. Now, I'm not going to bore you with the details of every single prompt that I did it. If you're interested in every single prompt, there's a link at the end, and I'll copy the link into the chat of the YouTube series, where it's like, it took about 3 hours, 3 and a bit hours to go through and build the whole thing. Now, you say, wow, 3 and a bit hours, that's a long time. Well, that's actually, like, if you had given me that picture of that visualization beforehand and told me, hey, I want you to build this, I would have quoted you weeks and weeks of work. Honestly, at least a week, if not 2 weeks of work, to get all the code right and to figure out what was going on and that kind of stuff. And so 3 hours is literally a miracle. And here's how it looked in the end. So we got to the point where we
Hi, Greg. Apologies. Your audio is just completely cut. One moment, everybody. I'll message Greg. Hi, Greg. Not sure if you can hear me.
check. Can someone let me know if audio?
Yes, you are back.
Something happened there. Sorry,
All
apologies.
good. Right,
Not sure
back,
where I got
everybody.
to. I'm back. Apologies for that.
All good. It was pretty much when we basically got to the chart that you have developed, so we kind of missed that whole section there.
That whole section, sorry.
Yeah.
All right, well, you've had a good chance to have a look at the chart. So this is how we ended up. There's aspects to here that like, you literally impossible to build in any other way other than to use custom visualizations. There's little raindrops on the total rainfall chart, which I added. There's all sorts of like visualization pieces that have been added to the to this, to be able to, and to do this through this kind of iterative approach is something that I didn't think was possible in ChatGPT when I started. And like I said, like, people were betting a beer against me being able to do it at all. But what we found was, through this kind of simple kind of iterative approach, giving it small instructions each time, you can actually build these sort of complex outputs through this kind of iterative development. I'm sure I said other things there, but I apologize for the audio going. Okay. So just a couple of tips on what I found while using ChatGPT to develop these more complex kind of things. Like I said, be polite. The model's built on human conversation. There was an official release from Microsoft saying it's, you get better outputs. They found you get better outputs if you're nice to ChatGPT, which I think is hilarious, and I love it. And so I make a point of always being nice. So there's my first tip. It's really important that you start simple and that you begin with a basic kind of working output, right? So what we did there is, I started that Deneb visualization with a basic already working visual, and then iterated on that already working visual. If you're starting with a piece of code that isn't working when you first start out, and then you're throwing it into ChatGPT and trying to get it to work, it's going to have a tougher time. I'm not saying it won't be able to figure it out. It probably will, to be honest. But it's much better to start with something that's working and go from there. You have to have a very clear idea of what you're trying to achieve to be able to get the best possible outcome. So that picture that I had to begin with was really, really important, because I could say, okay, I can see what I'm trying to do and I'm guiding it through there. So if you don't already have that when you start out, you should at least have start sketching out, at least have a clear idea of where you want to get it to before you want to iterate. Otherwise, you'll probably end up going in a strange direction. So you have to be careful about veering off course. So have a broad idea of what you're trying to achieve first and stay focused to that. The best way to do this, if you're working in an environment and you're developing something iteratively, and this is just generally speaking, is utilizing feedback from others to inform your refinements, right? This is a big thing in Power BI development. We build reports for a living in the Power BI world, and so we're constantly looking for user feedback to inform what our reports, what we need to change about them, because we don't necessarily know that. So this concept of using, if you're building this kind of iterative approach, you also have to incorporate user feedback in as much as possible. And one of the really useful things about doing this in ChatGPT is that it kind of automatically documents all of your iterations, and you can just go, if things go in a weird direction, which sometimes they will, ChatGPT doesn't always get it 100% right. It skips code. It has a tendency to try and add comments into code, which weren't supported in Denb, for example. So it's constantly putting all these comments in, and I had to remind it, hey, can you not put comments in the code, because the Denb platform doesn't support comments. And then, we do 10 prompts, and then 10 prompts later, it would start adding comments again because it's forgotten what it's doing. And that's what I was kind of saying earlier around the on the situation. Sorry, I just got distracted by the chat. So the fact that it documents it, you can kind of go back in time and go back to a working version and then restart from there. And also, of course, you're going to be using things like Git and other change management tools to be able to help you with that. We've got a question: how do you get the final visualization back to Denb Power BI? I'll have a look at. I'll show you that in just a second when we do the demo, which we should have time for. We've only got a few minutes to go. Just quickly, don't forget, if you're doing data visualization, so this is for those of you who are interested in the data visualizations, there's a whole bunch of other best practices that you need to kind of keep in mind. Obviously, we're talking about kind of a modular design. That's really what we're talking about, this concept of user-centric design and styling and responsiveness and performance optimization and data and all these other things, right? So there's a bunch of other things to consider in the data visualization world that's a responsibility of you, the human, to prioritize these things, because the AI won't necessarily do that for you. It'll follow basically what you ask it to do, particularly when you're doing smaller kind of prompts. So keep those things in mind. I heard a really good quote from the chief data officer at Telstra last week, Annie South. She said, the only thing AI can't teach us is how to keep our priorities straight, right? And so, or the only thing AI can't do for us is keeping our priorities straight. So this is a really about an amalgamation between you, the person doing the design, and the actual engine itself. All right, I've got a couple of minutes. I'm going to quickly show you, just to solidify kind of what the process is and how I kind of approached it. We'll do a simple kind of demo. Probably won't work, but we'll see. Maybe it will. You never know. Let's embrace failure. I noticed the meetup site was down earlier as well, so I had it up there. I've got my best friend. Her name is ChatGPT. I don't really assign it a gender. It's ChatGPT. We'll give it a name maybe. I like to give it a name when I'm doing my visualization. I also have, and just make sure that's working, I've got this. It's a sample data set. I literally generated it in ChatGPT. It's got the names of some towns in Australia, and it's got some average temperatures. That's it. And you can see we create a simple chart to show that, yes, there is data in here, the average of the average temperature by town. I'll create a quick measure to just give me that average. So I'll call it AVG temp. Let me make this a little bit bigger so you can see what I'm typing. Oh, it doesn't want to zoom in. Is that a new feature? Oh no, I just had the wrong. There we go. Average temp equals the average of the temperature. Average of the average temperature. Doesn't sound good, does it? Averaging an average, but I know what I mean. Okay, I'll remove this one and I'll put this measure in. And that's average temp by town. Great. So the way we get to Denb is we have to install it from the visual library. So we have to go over here and say, get some more visuals. We can search for Denb. It's probably already here somewhere because it's pretty popular. No, I don't see it. Type the word Denb in here. There it is. We'll add it. It's going to add it into our visualization area and our import it into our visualization area here. I'll add the Denb guy in here. And then inside the visual, there's a bunch of different documentation and stuff. And the way that you actually edit the visual is over here in edit mode. The first thing we have to do is add our values in and our towns in though, just to give it some data. Okay. So I'll go into edit mode here on the little dots. I'll just say simple bar chart. We've got a category and a measure. So our category is the town, our measure is the average temperature, and I'll hit create. So it's mapped now our visualization to the town to create. And like I said, this is a bar chart, so it's running horizontally. We can see our information down here, our little table of data, and then this is our Denb specification, which is the Vega-Lite piece. Okay, so what I do is I just copy this piece of code here, which is the initial working model. So it's a simple working version. Now, what I was hoping to do is create like a radial chart. I don't know if you've seen these types of global warming visualizations. I was like, this would be cool if I could build one of these. Now, these aren't really available in Power BI either. There might be one in the store, but I want to build it in Denb. This is my next challenge. So you can see like my first attempt and see if it works. So I go into ChatGPT and I say, hello. Oh, it's not going to work. Oh, it is going to work. Hello, we are building some stuff. Vega-Lite spec in Power BI Denb. Now, I don't think it knows too much about Power BI Denb, but I throw it in there anyway. Here is the current code. Give it the code. Then I say, I'd like this to be a radial chart instead. And then it's kind of a very basic kind of thing to get it started and see how it goes. So I'm not asking it to do too much other than to convert this into a radial chart, which hopefully it'll tell us to add things like theta and radius. Interesting. Now, one of the things I really like about the way that ChatGPT outputs this is it's very good at explaining what it's doing here. And then you'll see as we make changes, because this probably won't work first time, hopefully it does, but it tells you the changes that it's making as well, which is really nice. So it's saying, hey, here's an example of how we adjust our spec to create a radial bar chart based on the data encoding that we have. And then it's given me some spec. Now, the interesting thing, if you're doing this more seriously, you'll actually learn how to, like I started out not really knowing how to do Vega-Lite specifications, and I'm quite good at reading them now just from reading through so many different versions of the code, trying to understand exactly how it kind of, what are the things it changes. That's also an output of it explaining to me what it's doing as it goes. So you see here, we've got an explanation at the bottom. I've changed it. I've replaced the layer and the X and Y channels with the theta and radius channels for a radial representation. I use the stack equals true properties with the theta channel to ensure the bars are stacked around the circle. The color channel is used to differentiate the bars by town. Adjusted the opacity to see to conditions similarly to how it was already set up. And I specified the view property to ensure the visualization has enough space to render. I don't know if this is going to work, but let's see. So we copy the code. Literally just like take all this code and delete it and then paste new code in. Now it's already got some issues here saying that the schema validation shouldn't have added the property band. So this is where old mate is guessing. And so I just tell it that it's got schema validation errors saying that those properties aren't going to work. And we'll see if it works. Okay. I don't think it'll render. Oh, it tried to render. Didn't quite work though, did it? All right, let's see. I won't do too many iterations of this because obviously we don't have time, but I'll show you one extra iteration. Okay, we are getting a schema. I should not have the additional property band and field. Okay. Now, one of the things when we were doing this originally, we had actually Daniel Marsh-Patrick in the session, and he was telling me all of the this is why this is happening, this is why that's happening, which is quite useful. All right, let's see what it thinks. So let's embrace the failure. The band property is not applicable in this context in Vega-Lite. The mistake is on my part. Well, we don't blame here in the ChatGPT world. To achieve a radial bar chart, you may use Vega, not Vega-Lite. Interesting, due to its more extensive customization capabilities. So it's going to give me some Vega code. Now, that might mean that I need to change something here in the specification land. This says it's using Vega-Lite. I think I have to change it to Vega for that to work. Under settings, Vega, there it is. Don't know if that will ever come back now that I've clicked Vega. Hopefully it will. Copy code. Go thing. Nope, it's not going to work for me. Oh, well. But you get the idea. So we're just going through this kind of these constant iterations where and I can show you the kind of, this is what the actual real life, it is a real report. This is what the real visualization looks like in the end. You've got, and you can see it is all one visual, right? So there's not three visuals stacked on top of each other here. I've just got a single visualization that has all the information in it. If I click edit here in the Vega-Lite, you can see the full Vega-Lite specification, which isn't too long in the end. Like, it's not a crazy amount of code for particularly for something like ChatGPT, which has a certain amount of stuff it can do. Or a certain amount of memory, right? So you don't want to have too much code. If you're building something that's like much more complex, you will need to break the code up into different sections and then do each piece at a time rather than iterating over the whole code, because it's just what it will do is it will shorten the code. It'll go ... put the rest of your code here in between the different sections. So you kind of will need to be able to do that. But I think if you're messing around with code, you should be in a position where you can kind of read and understand what your code is. But that was me building this more complex kind of visualization. Other things that I've done in this space, using the same kind of technique. So like I said, I've been mucking around with Power BI for a while. I've written a whole film script. I've done kind of world building stuff. So, written out like a, wizarding world and all that kind of thing, like Harry Potter. I use it to build data pipelines in Python. Like I said, ChatGPT is extremely good at Python. You can build video games. You can do all sorts of stuff. Anything that's a little bit more complex, you're going to be using these kind of iterative techniques with ChatGPT. And so having a good kind of, practicing it a lot is really what it's about, and trying and failing and getting a thing. But if you do get to the point where you where you are good at building, solutions using this kind of iterative technique, like I think Netflix was looking for somebody to write films using large language model, and they were going to pay $900,000 a year. So, I feel like it's a skill that potentially worth learning. It's also something where I think people are saying, well, is prompt engineering going to be a thing? Is that going to be around for a while? And based on my experience, I don't think you're ever going to get to a point where AI is going to be able to reliably prompt itself. Well, when I say ever, maybe in the next couple of years at least, right? There's going to be a long time where you have to have somebody who kind of knows what they're talking about interacting with the AI to be able to get decent outcomes for all sorts of things. If you're trying to get ChatGPT inside Power BI itself, which I think was a question from Nilanjan, thank you, Nilanjan, that is an upcoming thing. It's an upcoming thing. So there's a few different ways you can think about that. So that would be, can we have ChatGPT inside our data to analyze data? I think that's, I don't know whether that's in the pipeline. I haven't seen anything necessarily where people are using it. You can use ChatGPT itself using Code Interpreter, which is one of the plugins. I think I have to set up a new chat and turn on Code Interpreter or plugins beta. Here's the plugins. There's data interpreter. There was a code interpreter as well. You can use some of these ChatGPT plugins. Oh, Julius, I don't know what that is. Chat with data with a Julius plugin. That's obviously not the thing I was trying to do. But you can definitely do a bunch of different interesting kind of data analyses inside the ChatGPT space. In the Power BI space, you do have these quick measure things that you can potentially do here, and it's got suggestions with copilots. This is an evolving feature, I would say. So getting it to write DAX for you and be able to chat with it and have a chat on the side. There's some interesting stuff coming out in this space soon. So the Copilot thing for Power BI definitely is on the cards. It's just a matter of time before they introduce that. Okay. If you're interested in seeing the full development life cycle, there is a YouTube playlist here. I should be able to capture that. Oh, let me just go back here. I should be able to capture that from here. I'll put that in a link in the chat for you all, in case you're interested. There's the link. So that's on our Dashboard Doctor channel. That is like every single prompt and every single rabbit hole I went down to make that happen. But like I said, it only took about 3 hours. So there's 3 1-hour videos there, just going through the whole process. We've got Daniel Marsh-Patrick in there. It's kind of the guy who invented Denb. And Kerry Kolosko, another data visualization expert who is really good, just talking through how we kind of went through the process of building that visualization. So I think it's a great way to kind of cheat. You're using ChatGPT, everybody's favorite tool. We're all trying to replace ourselves with AI, but I think the reality is we're going to be doing work for ourselves for a little while longer. We're at least going to be guiding the code builders. So very interesting kind of space. Some other resources, if you're interested in this kind of space of prompt engineering and ChatGPT, there's a special episode of the AI show on prompt engineering that you can watch. There's lots of documentation in the Microsoft site around prompt engineering and advanced techniques for prompting, talking a bit more about some of those other techniques as well for building out prompts, particularly if you're in the development space and you're trying to develop your own solutions and you want to become more proficient in prompt engineering to guide the AI in this piece in this way. I think it's really interesting idea to think that if we could build solutions that iteratively prompt in this simple way, I think there's some amazing stuff you could do, and I'm not sure how you would necessarily approach that. I know there's different tools and languages that you can pick up that do this kind of stuff, but if you can get it to run through a process and iteratively prompt each time, I think you could build some really amazingly complex solutions using this iterative technique. There's obviously Azure AI. You can sign up for Azure AI and the Azure OpenAI service if you want to get serious about using OpenAI in an enterprise context, if you want to do things like muck around with AI and ChatGPT on your own data, and you don't want to run the risk of exposing your data to the outside world. Obviously, for me, that was just weather data, so it wasn't sensitive. If you've got sensitive data, you can use the Azure OpenAI service for secure access to a GPT-4 model like ChatGPT, and you can use the Azure AI Studio, and then learn a little bit about deploying large language models with responsible AI. There's a link there for that as well. So we'll put all those links in the chat for you, and we'll hopefully supply you with those with this presentation so you can get access to those links. And that is just about it. So that is the kind of the journey of building something complex using ChatGPT, and it's really about iterations and then not being afraid to fail and trying new things and doing it. Please reach out to me, join up with me on LinkedIn if you're. It'd be great to chat with you about what you're trying to do in the either in the data visualization and Power BI world or in the ChatGPT world. I'm really interested in what people are doing in ChatGPT at the moment. Obviously, you can join the Power BI Meetup Melbourne. Find some more cool sessions at the Reactor Sydney as well, right? We've got lots of cool technology sessions happening in Reactor. So if you've got any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, but otherwise I'll wrap it up, and thank you very much. It's been great to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Greg. That was great. With the links as well that you've shared, I can pop them into the Reactor Sydney meetup page. And we'll also have the recording of the session linked in there as well. It just takes about 24 hours. Yes,
cool.
if you have questions, feel free to pop them through. But other than that, thank you everyone for joining, and we will see you all soon. Bye, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks. Bye.